Councilmember Davis. Here. Councilmember Keel. Here. Councilmember Kerr. Here. Councilmember Parment.
Here.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Thisted. Here. Mayor Riley.
Here.
There are 7 members present.
Thank you. We're going to try things a little bit differently tonight. As we've assessed how things performance went last week. I think you've all seen an email from our town attorney with some recommendations on the points of information, which makes things much easier. And in the case of motions, instead of asking for who's opposed, I will go back to the traditional way.
Oh, good.
Thank God. Of doing all those in favor, all those opposed. And we'll ease through it as we go forward. This is a learning process for all of us as we're going through. So if anyone has any suggestions for how we can improve the process as we're going, feel free to talk to me, let me know. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion? Councilmember Sullivan.
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? Councilmember Davis.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hands, please, yeah. All those opposed? Motion's carried. Now we're going into communications with the council. Is there anyone who would like to make a statement to the council? This is an opportunity to talk on any item you'd like that's not on the agenda. And you can speak for up to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And before we get there, before we proceed into the consent agenda, I'd like to recognize our town attorney and ask her to discuss briefly for all of us for information the purpose of the consent agenda.
Sure, I'd like you to speak to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda is typically for items on your agenda that are not controversial, items that you would not, council members would not typically have a lot of discussion on, that staff or the mayor would expect council to approve them without input from town council. You have first reading of ordinances, so your ordinance comes to you first on the consent agenda, and it'll come back to you later for discussion and a second reading. There are no ordinances tonight, but that is something that could be on a consent agenda. And the way that these items are approved is a motion to approve the consent agenda. So they're all of the items on the consent agenda are approved with one motion. So it's an efficient meeting practice. You can, if there are items on the consent agenda that you would like to discuss in further detail, you can ask to remove a specific item from the consent agenda. That would be a motion. I move to remove resolution 2024-23 from the consent agenda. So you can do that. And you can also ask maybe limited questions. I mean, very limited, I would say.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Just a comment.
Yes.
I'm just gonna comment, that's a good explanation, and we did it differently last week, you should remember. We even had public comment on each resolution, so we did that primarily because it was our first meeting, and I thought it was important, we all thought it was important that the public really get a full view of what is going on. The consent agenda is not trying to hide anything, it's just, again, as Jennifer has mentioned, for what we believe are non-controversial things, and it just speeds things up a bit to pass them all at once.
And can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve from consent agenda.
Is there a second? Councilmember Kurt.
The second motion.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Just again, maybe we were going to just read those titles.
I will read them.
Okay, perfect.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the resolution 2024-21 approving the town map, official town map, resolution 2024-22 designating the official newspaper, publishing local legislation and other matters, resolution 2024-23 designating the official town address, and the meeting minutes of the last meeting, February 8th, 2024. Can I have a vote? All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? The motion is carried with a vote of 7-0. The next item on the agenda is in the area of resolutions, and we're talking about resolution 2024-24 approving Colorado Open Records Act policy. And I'd like to now recognize our town clerk, Ms. C. Lou. Hopefully I got it close, to discuss.
Thank you, Mayor Riley, members of the council. This is just a resolution approving our Colorado Open Records Act policy. So essentially, if members of the public want to have access to any of the public records, this designates what that process looks like. It also designates a fee that we can prescribe for that research and retrieval time after a certain amount of time, after that first hour of research. So this just clarifies that policy and helps make that available to the public, and is something we can post on the website afterwards. And the staff memo has some examples of things that might be accepted from Cora and reasons why that would be, but it's a pretty standard policy to answer any questions.
And the floor is open for questions or discussion. Does anyone have any? Hearing none, I will open the floor for public comment. Is there any public comment? Here, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those, excuse me, point of order.
Point of order, Mayor, there's not a motion on the floor yet.
Thank you very much. Town attorney, and I will, I stand corrected. Can we have please have a motion? Councilmember Sullivan.
I move to approve resolution 2024 approving the Colorado Open Records Act policy.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Councilmember Keel.
Just a second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or any debate? Seeing none, now I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? The resolution is approved by a vote of 7-0. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of the family, and I'll recognize our town attorney, Ms. Manson, to please discuss it for us.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Town Council. I'll provide to you an overview of family, and what family stands for is paid family and medical leave insurance. This was approved by voters in November of 2020. And essentially it is it's a two-part program. It is a job protected leave for employees for specific reasons. And that's typically for medical and family reasons. It's a 12-week leave. And the other part of the program is partial replacement pay that is provided. It's essentially a social insurance. So employers and employees under family pay a portion of the employee's paycheck, a premium of 9%. The employee pays 0.45%, employers pay the other 0.45%, and it's paid into the state. And the state builds up that money, and that money then is used to pay out the benefits of the partial replacement pay when an employee needs that family leave. Under family, local governments have an option to opt out. And essentially, the reason is because the state can't force local government to spend that 0.45% to opt out. But a local government opt out, a decision to opt out of family, does not mean that the employee cannot participate. So there's a couple ways that a local government could opt out if that's what council decides to do. A local government can decline to all participation. So essentially, if town council decided that Keystone would not participate in family, then the employee would need to remit the 0.45% to the state of their paycheck, and the town would not be involved in any part of the administration of family. If the other option of declining to opt out is only of the employer participation. So essentially what would happen in that situation is the employee would remit the 0.45% of their pay through a payroll deduction, and that money then would be sent to the state through the town's payroll processor. I assume, because that's how it would work. And so then the employee doesn't have to actually do the administration of participation in the family. So for a decision to opt out, the state statute requires that the town, the local government, provide notice to its employees of that it's considering this, and the employees can communicate to council, providing feedback as to how they would like you to decide on this issue. And then you need to have a public hearing to make that decision. So what I'm looking for tonight is really to answer any questions that you would have on family, and then for direction from you as to how you would like to participate. And by participate, I mean, do you want to participate fully? Do you want to decline participation? And declining would be either declining completely or only declining the employer portion. So that's what I have for you. I know it's a lot, but I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions? Councilmember Kerr.
I'm interested in the background of why the state legislature exempted or accepted, whatever the right word is, municipal organizations or towns from doing so, and what other ones have opted out of the employer contribution.
So it's what's called and it's a term that you're going to hear very frequently in local government, and that's an unfunded mandate. And so that's why local governments, and it's not just municipalities, it would be schools, it would be any districts. It's that you would have to spend public money to have that employer participation, and the state is not funding that piece of it. So that's why it's an unfunded mandate. And I would say also then to answer the second piece of the question you asked about other municipalities who have opted out, in the staff report, the towns of Dillon, Frisco, and Silverthorne have all opted out, and Summit County has also opted out. I understand most local governments opt out because it really isn't taking anything away from the employees, because the employees can participate if they want. And also, I understand the town has some other benefits that may be very similar to what is provided by family. The short-term disability leave, I understand, is that? Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Question for you. You had mentioned there's three options. One, opt out, opt in, or we opt out, but the employee can opt in.
Correct.
So.
Through the town. So the town takes on the administrative role of processing that 0.45% premium for the employee.
Okay.
So the opt-out is of the employer portion, but for any employees who want to participate in family and remit that premium, then the town would take on that administrative aspect.
And that's the only thing. So no economic or financial obligation, just the time it takes and payable.
Correct.
Councilmember Keel.
Extension of that question. So if we decided to go that route, can you explain a little bit more about what we would need to do on that part? Like if they wanted to enroll, we have to have a hearing? Is that what you said? Or how do we go about establishing that if an employee wants to do it? They can just come to us and say, I want to do it, and it's done? Or what does that process look like? How difficult is it? What's the timeline? You know, what are we talking about? Is that a difficult feat for an employee, or is that a pretty?
So if the town decides to decline only the employer participation and the employee would be allowed to participate, there would be, probably a form that the employee would need to fill out and indicate that they want to participate in family and elect to have the 4.45%.
But we wouldn't need to register, we would not have to go through any sort of process like a town to support an employee going through that process.
Correct.
So explain to us the process that we would have to go through now to make that decision. If we were to make the decision for the town to opt out, but to allow the employees to participate through the town, what process does this council need to go through to make that happen?
Really, you just need to provide direction to me and to the town manager to take the steps necessary, bring this back on a future council agenda. We would bring back a resolution for you to vote on. And then before that, a letter would go out to your employee providing notice of that meeting date, when it's gonna happen, and to give the employee the opportunity to communicate with you as to, what the interest is, if there's any interest in participation.
But they don't have to declare that participation at that time. It's just their views basically on the opt-out.
Yeah, and the employees don't have to say anything. One of my other clients that I work for has approximately 85 employees, and no employee said anything about opting in or opting out, so.
Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Keel.
Sorry, one final question. Are we able to opt in or opt out at a later date? If we pick a decision now, are we able to change that later on? Is that a typical process?
That's a great question. So if you opt out, you have to, the opt-out is good for 8 years. So essentially you have to calendar that decision. And then 8 years later, you have to reexamine whether you want to continue that opt-out. Opting in, if you opt in, you have to opt in for a period of 3 years. If in between now and 8 years, you decide, oh, this is something that our employees really like, they want us to participate in family, it's a very successful program, you can opt in at any time. It is a new program, so, the most local governments were opting out in 2022. Premiums were collected in 2023. And this year, 2024, is the first year that benefits can be paid. So it's very new.
Is there any other discussion? So we do not need a motion for this. Did I see some discussion? Councilmember Davis?
I would like to suggest that we consider opting out, but allowing our employees to opt in if they wish.
All right. Is
So
there,
she's looking for direction.
is Councilmember Clement?
I concur.
Given that, and any other discussion? Can I have a simple thumbs up, thumbs down of whether you would support that position? And the position would be that we would opt out but allow our employees to participate through the town.
Yeah.
Ms. Manson, I think you have it, and Martinez, I think you have your direction.
Yep.
The next item on the agenda is the discussion of franchise fees for cable, gas, and electricity. And again, I'll turn to our town attorney, Ms. Manson.
So the town holds its streets, its public right of ways in trust for the public. A franchise agreement allows a private company to use those streets and make a profit for the use of those streets. The franchise agreements essentially require the company to operate in the right of way in accordance with rules and to pay compensation to the town for use of those streets. Franchise agreements are available for cable companies for use of cable and for also gas and electric. So this discussion item here is really to get direction from town council to start negotiations with Comcast and Excel. Comcast for a cable franchise and Excel for the gas and electric franchise. Currently, Comcast has a franchise agreement with Summit County. I am not sure whether Excel has an agreement with Summit County. I think the answer to that question is no. Because there needs to be some authority to provide for that franchise. So under the municipal statutes, municipalities have authority for the gas and electric. I don't think that there is a counterpart statute in the county statutes to allow counties to enter into a franchise. So the way that franchises are done is through an ordinance. I would need to bring back to you an agreement, a franchise agreement and an ordinance for both of these franchises. And if I get direction, we'll start working with Comcast and Excel to put together those agreements. And they're very standard agreements across the board. The rates are standard. So there's not a lot to negotiate.
Councilmember Carter.
just to clarify, so the negotiation is between the town and the corporation. The county, if it, let's say for the Comcast that already holds this franchise, they're not part of that, right? So it is up to Comcast to go to the county to get out.
Yes,
Two-way, not three-way.
it is. It's a two-way, negotiation. The agreement with the county is really that it's for roads that they have control over. And as of February 8th, the argument would be that they don't have control over these roads anymore. So, yeah.
Councilmember Davis.
Are these fees figured into the budget or would this be additional funds?
Right. The answer to that question, it would be additional funds. Councilmember Parmet.
Questions, following up on the last one, do we have any estimates of how much funding? And paired with that, would the franchise fee apply to, the 3% gas and electric, would that apply to what is used on Mountain? And the last question is just to clarify that 3% gas and electric fee is not currently appearing on any one in Keystone's bills, but it would appear. Those are the clarifications I'm seeking.
So the way I understand it, it's gonna be a property owner who is located within the jurisdiction of Keystone. So as to the on mountain question, I think the answer to that would be no. But I don't know. I don't know what part of Trail Resort is in Keystone, then I guess it's something we're gonna have to figure out. And I don't know the answer to that, really.
I'd be curious to know. I'm guessing maybe it's where the meter is, but
Yeah. That's probably what it is. I don't know. I'd have to find out.
restating the additional, there would be everyone in Keystone would then see a 3% fee coming onto their gas electric.
Correct. It's passed through to the consumer.
Is there any other discussion?
Just-
Councilmember Kerr.
Follow up to that, and is the assumption that Comcast is already paying county, and that's already showing up in everybody's bills.
Yeah, there should be a franchise fee, dollar amount on anybody's Comcast bill.
Okay, so it's the Excel.
Yeah.
Councilmember Sullivan.
And a franchise fee is not a tax, it's a number.
Right. Yeah, it's a fee for the use of the right of way.
Councilmember Parmet.
Totally agree. It's not a tax, it is a fee. But it would have an impact on all residents here. And I know that we have, in the short term, without the ability, to have any taxes until that can be brought to the voters, if any will be, we have a need to have the town run. My question would be, is it possible to negotiate these for a shorter time period than 10 or 20 years if this group would consider whether this would be needed long-term versus other sources of funding in order to relieve those who are living in this community from potentially experiencing a permanent 3% increase to their gas and electric bills?
Is that a question?
That is a question. Can we do a short?
Yes. And do a shorter term, franchise fee.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Teal.
I guess I would like to see what that Excel would sort of look like, because we haven't been seeing that yet. I'd like to see what that contract would sort of look like. I mean, Comcast, they've already had that franchise in place. We sort of know where we're getting that from. I think Excel is the big, what are we looking at here? Is there a way to get some of that information before we make a full decision on this?
Yeah, yes, you can provide direction. For that.
The point of information is, we're not making a decision. Are we making a decision tonight, or are we just making a decision to allow council to go forward and investigate and bring something back to us?
Okay, well, I'd like
That's, that's the question.
Yes, that's what you can do. So just to follow up on that, though, I'm hearing that there is an interest to move forward with the Comcast franchise. And these need to be brought back in an ordinance. Typically ordinances, you have a procedure in your charter related to ordinances. So an ordinance, needs to have 2 readings. And then after the second reading, it's not effective until 30 days. So for example, with the Comcast one, you'd have to have it go to, and then you wait another 30 days after approving it on that second meeting. And this is, so I'm providing this information related to when you would actually be able to get that franchise fee. You can also approve an ordinance, an emergency ordinance, and that would be in 1 reading, and then it would be effective immediately. So that's an option with Comcast. And Excel, I can come back and provide more information, but if you'd like more information on both, I can do that.
Any, Councilmember Kirk?
I think that, I shake your head, no, but I think the consensus is we'd like to move forward with an ordinance about the Comcast. We'd like more information about Excel, and we'd like to separate those 2 actions.
Okay, so I might even be able to come back with an emergency ordinance for Comcast on the February 27th meeting.
Councilmember Davis?
Does this qualify under, I mean, it would make sense, but does it qualify under our definition of an emergency ordinance? A Comcast, I'm not talking about it.
Yes, it would qualify. You would make a legislative determination that there is a need for an emergency ordinance for preservation of revenue and the health and safety of the town for that revenue, the franchise fee revenue.
Councilmember Keel?
So I think the biggest thing I'm looking for the Excel is sort of going off of what Aaron said. I'd really like to know who this is going to impact and who it's not going to impact. You know, there are gonna be chunks of our community paying this 3% and then chunks not paying this 3% who are living at the golf course, or, you know, those sections that aren't incorporated with us. And then how does that interact with CDOT or areas that we're still not going to control? So I guess I'd like to see what that map is that it's actually going to affect. Like, is this gonna be everybody is going to affect this? Or, you know, are we gonna have these weird pockets of, well, this community pays for it and this community pays for it, but none of these do?
Can I try to answer that?
Yeah.
From the town map standpoint, all the residents in Keystone are part of the town and it would apply to them. The only area that wouldn't, from a resident standpoint, would be about 100 apartments in Winter
Okay.
That would not apply to 100 apartments in Winter It would not apply to the Keystone Ranch restaurant and golf club facility. And it would not apply to the Mountain House Lodge, but it would apply to all the residences. And the question is where the mountain electricity is, whether that's applied or not, I don't have an idea. But that gives you an idea from a resident. There wouldn't be real pockets within the community that it would not apply to.
Okay.
Councilmember Parmet?
I just want to thank the mayor for that clarification. And then also that's something for anyone listening, the clarification on the Comcast. Again, and I think you'll confirm. That already exists. It wouldn't change anyone's bill. And it only applies to cable, not Comcast internet or phone service.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, you're gonna see this go away. This isn't gonna be a forever revenue stream for the town because it only applies to cable.
is there any other discussion? Councilmember Davis?
What do you mean by it's gonna go away?
Well, I mean, people
See,
are,
the
people are
cable is-
getting rid of cable.
Okay,
So it sounds to me like the consensus of this group is to give direction to proceed with cable. With an emergency ordinance for cable?
yes. Why not?
It's fine mediation. And to to give us further information on, Excel, the impact of Excel for the community, and also, to verify that in fact there is no franchise fee that the county is currently collecting on Excel. So, does that summarize?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. Can you, Excel's very good about itemizing their bill. And, just confirm that they will probably add that on as well, as line item.
Before we vote, I for one would be very hesitant to add a additional fee onto any of our constituents for a Excel franchise fee if it was not currently being collected by our county at this time.
And
Councilmember Permit.
I share your opinion, so yes.
Can I ask a follow-up? With the clarification that you provided, Mayor, what is the request of me for further information on
But
where the fee?
the question is either of you or staff is to come back and let us know more information on Excel, whether there is a franchise fee being collected today or not.
Okay,
And if, I think that's probably the first question before we go, Councilmember Keel.
And how it affects the mountain operation.
And how it affects mountain operation.
And are there, and take a look at the different durations, different options.
and that's something I can answer that right now, a term, we can negotiate the term.
Right.
So if you want to reduce term, definitely we need to negotiate that. Also, just to clarify, so that all of you know that, once a franchise fee or franchise agreement is in place, any area that is not included in the town, which is then later annexed into the town, would need to pay for that franchise. So they'd be covered by that.
Does one other question, does the franchise fee, or does the franchise agreement cover other items related to that utility other than just the fee? Does it govern at all how that entity deals with the town and the town residents?
So, it relates to the use of the right of way and the entity's use of the right of way. I'm very fortunate that, one of my law partners works a lot in franchise agreements, so I don't have a lot of expertise on what those agreements, speak to. But I can provide more information on that.
Because there may be a reason to have a franchise agreement, even if there's not a
Yeah,
fee associated with it. Councilmember Sullivan.
so we have a little gap here. So right now, they're providing services. We have a town. So is there any issue with that, a month or two or three that we don't have a relationship with them?
With Comcast or Excel or both? I mean, no, they're gonna be using the right of way. They already have their lines in the right of way. They're using the right of way. Right now, if the county has any regulations related to use of right of way, if they need to dig in the right of way for any reason, those county rules would apply. So that's
So there's no issue with that.
right.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion? Have we provided you with just the broad guidelines that I've laid out?
Yeah.
Is that sufficient guidelines for you? Go
Yeah.
forward.
Bunch of things.
I have a bunch of random thoughts. All right. Is there any other discussion? The next item on the agenda is moving into a discussion of the process for hiring the town manager. And I'll turn the discussion over to our interim town manager, Mr. Martinez.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Just a little overview for all the people in the audience, but there are people in the audience, and just to give everybody a chance, including the council, and understanding where we're at. Tonight's going to be kind of a two-part discussion on town managers. The first part is now, and that is the process. And we started this discussion a few weeks ago with the steering committee. We sort of punted until tonight, but I'll go back through some things in just a moment. The second part of this tonight is that, we've been collecting applications or resumes from those interested in, becoming the town manager. And we'll discuss those in executive session. The reason for that is that, people who apply often are, well, most all of them are currently employed in other locations, and the idea is not, jeopardize their current positions, by the mayor reading their name in the paper someplace, somewhere else in the state or out of state. So we'll take those up in a few minutes. So the last time talking about process now, the last time we discussed, the first question was, did you want me to narrow down the number of applications to, one of two numbers? One would be like maybe 6 or 7 or 5 or 6 or 7 applications, send you home with the resumes. And by the way, you all now have received all the resumes as of this afternoon sometime. And those need to be kept confidential, as I think you know. Send you home with the homework assignment of looking at, let's say, the top 6 and asking you to rank those, and we'll take maybe the top 3 or 4 for final interviews. You didn't seem too keen on that the last time, but you may decide that's not a bad process of thinking about it this evening. Or just have myself bring in, after screening and doing some background work, bring in the top 3 or 4 for your consideration. That seemed to be your preference the last time, but that's the first part. Now, let me just go through this. We can come back to all these. If we then, then we will have some number of finalists. The second big question is, do you want to bring finalists to Keystone or somewhere in the county, but preferably right here, for interviews? Or would you want to opt to do a Zoom, do some sort of video type of interviews with the finalists? And then finally, the last question, we'll go back over these in a second. You also can bring applicants to the community. Another option you might want to consider is whether or not you have a public session. That would be like, let's just say a Thursday evening. All the applicants are here. We meet in this room. You invite the public, and you ask each of the candidates at some point, just do a real brief overview, name, rank, serial number kind of thing. I'm from so-and-so, 30 years in the business, whatever. And the community gets a chance to at least get somewhat of a preview of the person. That is not something that will be used to, I guess, somebody really doesn't do very well in that session. I guess that tells you something, but you're still making the decision in the following day when the interviews would be scheduled consecutively at some some time of the day. So those are the things I'd like to go back over. So going back to number one, would you like me to, bring in the top 6 or 7, send you home with the rating sheets? You do, 1 through 6, let's say. We drop out maybe the number 5 and 6 and go with the 4 finalists? Or do you want me to bring in, the second option is, do you want me to bring in those, the top 4, in my opinion, to you, straight out?
Councilmember Sullivan.
I kind of like the idea of the 6, but I'd like to go to 2 and we bring this to here.
6, go 6 and go down.
My thought is, we can look at, you give us your top view of 6.
Okay,
We come back and give you our views and narrow it down to 2, and then we invite those 2 to Keystone for interviews.
okay.
Councilmember Sullivan. Councilmember Davis.
Is 2 enough? It's just, I understand what you're saying, I'm just wondering.
You know, it could be, but I over the years, interviewing people for community resource, or community development directors, HR directors in, either the town of Breckenridge or Summit County where I worked, inevitably you have someone drop out. And it doesn't happen all the time, but oftentimes it does. Or you have somebody that just, well, but that's the main thing. So if you have 3, 1 drops out, you still have your 2. If you have 2, I guess that's not all bad if you really feel strongly about that person. So it's, that's all I would say.
Councilmember Kirk.
I think we don't want to be in a position where if one were to drop out and then we really don't have a choice. And that choice might look like starting all over again. And I don't think we want to start over again. So maybe a modification of Councilmember Sullivan's option is 6 down to 3 for consideration.
Councilmember Permit.
I would agree with that. In addition, I like the idea of the curated list from Manager Sullivan, who's been looking at those, and rank order voting from each of us to make the determination of the final 3.
So I missed a little bit. So come back with 6 or something is, okay.
Yeah, I was supportive of you making your recommendation of 6.
Okay.
And each of us rank order voting from your list.
Okay. Good comment.
Any discussion?
I would accept that, really, and then.
Okay, that's good, good.
Then do I have a consensus of the council that we will, town manager will provide us with his 6
Yep.
recommended candidates. We will rank order them, provide them the information, and then come back and do a selection of 3 finalists.
Okay.
Consider the results of that, and the council will make a selection of the 3 finalists.
Perfect. Yeah, your votes then, I'd bring it back so you know what, obviously what it was. 1 through 6, and, the rank order is simple at that point, and they drop out 2 or 3, I guess 3 at this point. Okay,
All right.
got it. Next question. You want to bring people in person to Keystone?
Councilmember Sullivan.
I was gonna, thought you were asking another question, the next 3rd one. Yes on that, and then I want you to clarify the process, but maybe that's the 3rd question, about having the community. There was some confusion, I think, last time you brought that up. That is the community asking questions of all these guys or gals with it? Or is it, what's that process?
It's really anything you want to do, but traditionally, I don't think you want the community hammering questions at the applicants and what have you. Sometimes, as people come in, you can say, listen, if you have a question, other than just, getting to know the person, so Dan would stand up and say, I'm from, Lamar, Colorado. I've been a manager there for so many years, 20 years in the business overall. Great being here today. That stuff would come out as like an introduction from each of the candidates while the citizens are all gathered, and you're gathered here with them. You could add some questions there, but if that's the case, then I would ask that anybody wanting to ask a question, submit those in writing to me. And I would screen those down, because you can get some crazy questions. But then I would ask each of the candidates to, maybe take 2 or 3 questions. But the idea primarily of the mixer is to just more of a meet and greet, just a little bit of exposure to the candidates, to the community to the candidates. And, some people think this is not necessary, but this is a brand new town with a lot of people wanting to be involved and really rooting for you guys to do a good job. And it seems to me that it wouldn't be a bad idea to have have an evening for an hour or hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half perhaps, to just to have that sort of casual exposure, meet and greet with the candidates.
Councilmember Peel.
So I guess my biggest hesitation about that is, all these applications are confidential. Are they not? So if we're hosting like a public, we're outing candidates before they're being job offered, and that makes me a bit uncomfortable,
Yeah.
especially given that we have some relatively local candidates that are then going to be, they're not all getting a job, so it creates an awkward dynamic, I think, and I'd like to, I guess, clarification from the attorney.
Good question. I'm Jennifer had asked, but
What that.
we have
looks like.
an answer to that, but let's let the attorney do explanation.
Well, I think one is, there would be a conversation with the candidate that this is what's gonna happen. There is a requirement actually in, the Colorado Open Records or Open Meetings Law, which I don't know why it's in the Open Meetings Law, but you have to provide public notice of your finalists. And then wait 14 days before you can make a job offer. So you have to identify finalists and then then you make a job offer to one of those persons.
Okay, so the finalists are all gonna be known regardless.
Yes.
That's right. We would, at some point, this number, the overall number gets whittled down to the number you wanna see. And then we need to make that becomes public at that point. And all candidates really understand it. They do expect confidentiality during the preliminary review, but they all understand that at some point their names will be made public.
Okay.
Councilmember Piston.
What is the purpose of the 14-day notice? Is it for public feedback in case somebody has some egregious concern about one of the candidates? And that seems bizarre.
I really don't know. I don't.
Is it like a background check period?
No, it's just, I mean, maybe it is. It probably is that it's a transparency thing, because that's why it's in the open meetings law. It's a transparency thing so that the government can't just say and this only applies to your chief executive officer for local government. So that maybe there's not a like background deal, I guess. That's the one thing I can think of.
Councilmember Peel.
So going off of that, I guess if the group decided that that's what, the council wants to do that and hold it open, would it be possible to also maybe in that same day or that next day, schedule more, intimate meetings? I think it'd be really valuable for this committee to have more one-on-one or, 3-on-1 or two-on-one conversations with applicants and not just an open. I see it as more valuable to actually be able to get, more comfortable with questions with an applicant than just sort of like a panel situation.
You're talking now about this. The
This
second.
counts, yeah. Because part of the interview process is, us asking them questions, and I feel like it's a bit scripted, and I was just wondering if there was a way to include some more time, I guess, in some sort of fashion for us to get a little bit more acquainted with these candidates than just simply tell us about a time sort of questions, Does that make sense? Is that bizarre? I want to make sure we get a good feel of the candidates beyond just the candid scripted, the candidate is there, we're here, and here are the questions.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question. About your question. Well, the one option would be, we schedule interviews the next day. And those applicants all come in one by one and we have a discussion, and you will get better feeling about each applicant. Not only are you hearing their questions, but just seeing people live in person, to me, makes that it also gives you some other good cues about the applicant. But you're talking about something maybe breaking it up into maybe 4 and 3 or something.
I mean, I don't know, however it would work. If we decide we want to go the public route, great, but, I'd like, at least speaking personally, I would like to get to know the candidates a little bit better than just a panel of questions, I guess. However that would work. I mean, whether that's still just the 7 of us or whether that's smaller groups or, whatever you tell me, I don't know. But I think it would at least be beneficial to me, and I can't speak for everybody else, to get, a little bit closer to the 3.
Yes, I didn't have to work on that one, but.
Maybe that's bizarre. Maybe that's a bizarre.
Well, no, I see what you're saying. I get it really clearly. I guess we'd be bringing these candidates in, like, let's say, just a Thursday and a Friday. And maybe we could schedule something earlier on the day Thursday, there's, to have some time, individual time. You gotta do it all. And you're doing the interviews anyhow the next day, so.
I know it's a logistical question. I don't know how it would work, but I want to make sure we're making the right, decisions for the community. And I think for me, I need more than just, here's the 6 questions we're going to ask you here. And then we're just going to decide. I'd like a little bit more give and take from a candidate than that, if possible.
Councilmember Davis?
I understand what Sarah's saying, but I don't understand how that works with the open meetings.
We would have to have smaller groups.
And I would personally have a problem having smaller groups because then we're denying, we're violating our views of transparency.
But if we're doing both, that was what I was asking. If we're going to have a public session, would we then be able to also have a smaller group where we could ask additional questions?
I have a question for the town manager. Is there anything to prevent in a public session, follow-up questions by the council members if they have them of the candidates?
In the polls.
No, we're in the interview process. When we're interviewing, that's a public meeting. And so we'll have public here because we're all gathered together as a council. So I believe that becomes a posted public meeting. Is there anything to prevent a council member, besides the standard questions we want to ask them all, to have a follow-up and say, what are your thoughts on this and what are your thoughts on that?
In that public meeting.
Yeah, all the interviews have to be public.
No, I mean, we might have 10 questions or something, or whatever number of questions you want to ask. And I guess now you're saying is then, could you get a little more intimate? You can ask them some just additional questions that have been printed up for you to talk through, I should say, yeah.
Councilmember Arnett.
Just following up that line of questioning, I think, two questions that might have been at play are, one, could there be direct communication with a candidate from an individual council member offline afterwards, right, rather than in meeting, or would that violate transparency? And the second question is, if there's a particular question that is a pricklier question, could there be an executive question to ask that? Would that be a violation of transparency?
Jennifer, I'm gonna look at you on that one.
So there really aren't, executive sessions can be held for, specific reasons laid out in the open meetings law, and there really aren't any, categories except for negotiation of contract maybe. So if there were contract discussions, those could be held in an executive closed meeting. But that said, individual council members or two members of town council can talk with a candidate without it being an open meetings issue.
Councilmember Pista.
Can I just clarify your original intent? Because initially you mentioned that the idea of possibly having a public session and then having interviews the following day. And is it a correct assumption that that interview the following day with the candidates we decided to bring to town would be interviewing with you only? Is that what the original intent was?
Yeah.
What was the original intent when you mentioned a public meeting followed by interviews the following day?
But who's following day would be with this group?
We would have a second.
Yes.
So
A second public meeting.
Yeah, and
Sorry, that got very convoluted.
I remember many interviews that I've had with, the public present, but that would be an open meeting?
Yes.
Okay, learn something every day. But yeah, the intent, again, was to have that applicant then in front of the 7 elected officials here and then answering questions. Yeah, and you can go off script, you can ask, follow-up questions and do all those kinds of things. Oftentimes you might be, I'm not sure I've heard an answer to that question. You might want to follow up with some additional, follow-up questions that would clarify. So you will get a little more into it with each candidate than just the, basic questions that are being, printed up and asked. But it is with all 7.
The next day,
That's kind of the idea, right?
but it's still a public meeting.
I guess so.
Well, the public's invited, but not necessarily able to participate. They can
Okay.
sit and watch.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for clarifying.
Good thing.
All right, is there any other? Councilmember Kerr.
I listened very closely to your concerns, and I think I hear you saying you don't think you can make a decision based on listening to rehearsed and perhaps inauthentic responses to our official questions.
Well, especially if it's done in a public
Yes,
forum, because, that's how candidates, that's how I would be in an interview, right? You speak up when you come prepared.
so I would ask that whether the ability for each of us, if we want to go to that evening session the night before, which is semi more relaxed, not a Q&A session, but getting to know each other session might be an option. And if I understood correctly, any one of us could chat with each candidate on a 1 or 2 basis. Is that accurate?
Yes.
My concern about the alternate that you proposed is a matter of equity. I started this, as I was listening to this, I was concerned about what happens if we offer them that opportunity to come the night before, and for some reason or other, that's not a possibility. Would we intentionally or not hold that against the individual that they weren't willing to come, even the community member? So I don't know if that's a valid question, but it does make me ask the question, can we be equitable if we have these small groups meeting and we're not asking each candidate the same kinds of questions. And I just throw that out to think about.
Is there any other discussion?
Well, let's backtrack here. So I think I'm hearing, yes, bring the candidates in.
Yes.
Good, okay. And I think I'm hearing that we should try to set up some kind of public mixer the night before, whatever the dates are.
To meet the candidates. I mean, that's kind of, it's just, meet the candidates, so.
Yeah.
And so that mixer would be to, provide our constituents an opportunity to meet the
Yeah.
candidate. By the constituents, I mean the entire Keystone community, an opportunity to meet the candidates, as well as ourselves to have an opportunity to meet the candidates in a more informal environment.
And an opportunity for the candidates to hear from.
And to see the community, yeah.
And then the one remaining question there, if we have the public session, I would encourage you to ask each, well, we would ask each candidate to, make a brief introduction and then, but then do you want to allow other questions to come in? I'd screen them out, but it makes it a little, it's a little more work, a little more formality gets thrown in there.
I guess, how do you, because we're gonna be doing, I think you're saying a little bit of the social mix, and if somebody has a compelling question, you can just go up to an individual and ask.
Yeah, that's true too, yeah. Good, okay, so it's mainly a social function with just a little introduction and, right, okay. And then, interviews the next day with the entire group. Were the questions, those sample questions I sent out, were those that are all helpful? Did they spark any thoughts and ideas? Because at some point I'll be putting together a list of questions. I try not to make those the same, tell us about yourself and why do you want this job? Well, but it's, questions are questions, So, but if there are any of those ones that you saw, that you reviewed, there's a certain type of question stuff you need to let me know so I can mix that into the, overall list of questions. Is that all helpful?
Yes, I'm the only
So then tell us all that.
ones that add back to what I heard earlier, that and we want to make sure that we can ask follow-on questions and a little bit more interactive.
Mhm.
So it's not just completely scripted.
That's right, yeah.
Is Councilmember Davis?
From the logistics, when we interview, I'm assuming we do one right after the other.
Yeah, there's gonna be a little logistics I'm gonna have to think through because you're gonna have one person waiting around for 4 or 5 hours. That's another opportunity to get other groups in town to, take them around or yeah, it would be pretty much one after the other, maybe 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon or something like that. Give yourselves a break, because interviews, in my opinion, they wear you out. So, maybe we'll do 2 in the morning and then, early afternoon and mid-afternoon and
An hour each.
about an hour.
Any other discussion?
Okay, I think I got it.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Is that all you have for that agenda item, Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
All right. And the next item on the agenda is report of the town manager and staff. Do you have any report, Mr. Martinez?
Yes, and in an effort to keep Jennifer really working hard, I'll be asking the town attorney to start work on the amendment to the IGA that we approved last week with Summit County for the continuation of services. I think we even spoke that or talked that night about how 90 days is gonna go really quick. So I'll be asking Jennifer to start work on that document. We get a little ahead of the curve. Secondly, regarding, this is just a report, no action obviously here, but the mayor and I had a meeting this past week with the Dillon town manager and chief of police. The topic was to investigate, to look into the option or the idea of trying to do a joint law enforcement, joint police force. Just preliminary, I would say that the conversation went extremely well. K.L. Osborne is the chief of police in Dillon. He is going to start looking at a variety of things that he needs to kind of get his hands around and get his head around in order for them to put together, you know, or maybe not put together. Maybe that data collection causes them to decide this isn't going to work. But it sounds like they want to try, and I think it's a great thing. So many times in government, you hear about trying to consolidate services, and so few times have I seen anything really happen. But they're open to it. They need to collect data. They need to put the pencil to paper in terms of costs, what it would cost them, what it might cost us to buy into that type of system. But that's all information to come. And just wanted you to know that we have looked into that. And we'll probably be meeting fairly soon with the sheriff regarding the continuation of services from the sheriff's office for law enforcement, you know, beyond the 90 days that we have here. Anything with the town of Dillon that might come about would be probably late this year, maybe next year. So we're gonna need the sheriff to do some more work for us after the 90-day period, which we'll be getting to.
And I would envision that the town of Dillon would probably start out with definitely with a contract situation with us. And long term, it potentially could go into some sort of a joint operation with the two departments. But I would expect initially it would probably be a contracting service to the town. As far as the sheriff, again, meeting with the sheriff, not only to discuss the continuation of services for this year, but also provide us to start a discussion to see if there might be an alternative to the town of Dillon to give us an option for longer term service as well. To see if there's any interest there at all.
So just a report to tell you, we're working on it.
Okay. And we don't expect a follow-up with the town of Dillon probably until second week or third week, probably first or third week of March. They have a lot of internal work to do.
That's all I have.
All right, any items from the council? Councilmember Sullivan.
I have this question. I wanted to commend the folks that put together the employee handbook. But I did have a question. One question about it was, going through it in more detail, reading through the part-time employees vacations. We have they get vacation time, is that correct? So how does that work? Because the definition of part-time is 0 to 30, right? Or something, is that right?
Councilman Sullivan, can I suggest that be deferred until we bring the employee handbook to the council for approval? And we can discuss it. There'll be a formal process to go through the approval to approve that employee handbook.
Okay, that's fine. I know we talked about it last time. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that acceptable to you?
Fine by me,
Because we're gonna need
but
to.
it's 32 or less hours.
It's our
Less than 32 hours.
And another answer to your question, it's normally based on, they get a vacation based on the percentage of hours that they work versus full time. They get that percentage in hours is normally how it works. Is how you.
That's a question. Okay, thank you.
But we will have a large body of time to go over that handbook, and the town attorney is gonna get an opportunity to review it, give us advice on it as well before we adopt it.
Okay.
Any other questions from the council? I do have one item for you, and that is, the Summit County is submitting a, grant request to the Department of Transportation, to resurface Swan County Road, Swan Mountain Road. And they have asked us to give them a letter of support. Would it be acceptable to the council if I drafted that letter of support and submitted it to them? All right. Thank you. And now the next, any other items?
I'm gonna bring up something about planning
I'm
commission.
not there yet.
Oh, okay.
We now are into other matters. In other matters, we can bring up items that are not necessarily on the agenda. Councilmember Kerr.
Well, given that you just gave this away, I'm thinking along the same terms. I'd like to propose a future agenda item. I acknowledge the town is 6 days old. I acknowledge we have 2 full-time staffers, and we have a boatload of essential to-do items on our list. But I also want to acknowledge that both the charter and many of our comments at our meeting candidates night sent a strong message to the community that we intend to have a lot of citizen involvement and interaction. So I propose that we make a positive action to place citizen commissions on a future, but not too future agenda. As the mayor noted, this 90 days is going to go very fast. So throwing it out for your conversation, discussion, maybe the next 2 to 4 meetings that we actually discuss what we want to do for the required planning and zoning commission and a proposed citizen advisory commission. Oh, your thoughts?
I would make you split those into 2 pieces. Citizens Advisory Committees at the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's just a matter of what may be priority.
And I don't disagree. I just want to make sure we send a message that we've taken this seriously.
One of the recommendations I was gonna look to see if there was agreement among the council members that we begin now to take actions to put in place the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's going to require an ordinance to put that in place. So that will probably require several meetings for that to happen. And if it's acceptable to the council members, I'd like us to give guidance to the staff to begin preparation of that ordinance to put the Planning and Zoning Commission in place, and then potentially begin, and I guess the question for the town attorney is whether we could begin recruiting members for the Planning and Zoning Commission prior to the ordinance being finally put in place. We couldn't appoint them until the ordinance was in place, but could we go out publicly and recruit and gather names?
The only issue that I see with starting the recruitment process is the ordinance is likely going to specify what the membership requirements are for the planning commission. So if the ordinance were to change, then that would change your recruiting.
Councilmember Kerr.
Isn't it fair to note that the Planning and Zoning Commission membership is fairly spelled out in the charter already?
It is to some extent. So the charter provides that a majority of the membership of the Planning and Zoning Commission shall consist of primary residents. It cannot be council members, the mayor, or any full-time employees. But you could have other qualifications that are spelled out in the ordinance.
Councilmember Liston.
Is the consideration of how we, post and recruit members something that we would accommodate for in the ordinance?
Not likely. That's more of an administrative piece.
I guess my concern is that they're hand selected rather than it being put out to the community to call for volunteers.
Well, you can decide as the town council. I mean, that's typically how how members of boards and commissions are recruited is that there is a posting that we're looking for volunteers. So that's typically how it's done, and that's not usually something that you see in an ordinance. That's not to say that it couldn't be in there.
But it's common practice.
It's common practice that it's done that way, but not included in your code language.
And that's, I'm sure the way you would, I at least personally, I would view this as having to be a very public and open and transparent recruitment with a call for volunteers, receiving those volunteers, having staff vet those volunteers and make recommendations to the council. Can I have, first item, can I have a consensus from the council to direct staff to begin developing the town ordinance for establishing a planning and zoning commission?
Yes.
And then the question is, I guess the first question is, when do you believe you could have a draft of that ordinance?
I could have a draft ordinance for, well, I would suggest that an ordinance be drafted for discussion first. By the next meeting, the 27th.
Is that sufficient time to begin the recruitment process after the 27th, or would we prefer to start sooner? What are your thoughts? Council member?
We already know that there are members of the community interested in doing this. So you could use the phrase soft recruitment to simply say, we can let people know that we're going to start this action. We're not formally recruiting yet, but we're spreading the word.
So we're not accepting applications yet.
Right.
We are,
Sending a strong signal that we're ready to do that soon after the ordinance is passed.
then would it be fair to ask the town staff to, when they present the draft ordinance for discussion, to also let the council know how they would propose to announce and recruit the members of the planning commission? Yes, Councilor.
To staff to propose how we would advertise and
Advertise.
get the word out officially, yeah, okay.
Is that agreed?
Yes.
Super. Now, back to Councilmember Kerr's Citizens Committee.
I recognize that this is not mandated in the charter, but we do have sort of a promise to that end. So when we go back to my recommendation that we put it as a point of discussion, 3 or 4 meetings from now. And I don't know if you recommend that we ask for an ordinance or simply start with a discussion of how we might benefit from the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Would there be, a point of information is, would there be requirement for an ordinance to establish a Citizens Advisory Committee, or could it be handled via resolution?
It could be handled by a resolution. I mean, typically your boards and commissions are formalized by an ordinance. And usually those ordinances then are codified, so it becomes part of your municipal code. The resolution couldn't be codified. The resolution just would make it seem to be perhaps less permanent.
Then would it be acceptable to say, ask the town staff by the end of March, come back and to open that item as a discussion item?
I think that gets to exactly what I'm looking for, because this will give us some time to think about. and an opportunity at that meeting at the end of March to discuss how we would want to use that, which is all new to us.
Mr. Martinez, is it achievable from a town staff standpoint to, by the end of March, be able to have a discussion item on the town council agenda to discuss citizens advisory committee objectives and involvement of the community in that?
Good chair, yeah. So by end of March,
And that's just to get
with an accelerated, situation for the planning commission.
planning and zoning commission. Very good, so, thanks. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yes.
Great. All right. The next item on the agenda is an executive session, and I'm going to ask our county attorney to briefly explain to not only us, but also those in attendance, a little bit about executive sessions, why they're there, and then we will proceed.
So executive sessions are permitted under the Colorado Open Meetings Law. They are permitted to, well, as everybody's heard tonight, for the general proposition is that meetings of the town council are open to the public. You have to provide notice of those meetings, and the public must be allowed to show up and listen in on those meetings. There are limited circumstances in which a local government may go into what's called an executive session. Executive sessions are meetings that are closed to the public. And the reasons for executive session are spelled out in the state statute in the open meetings law. And they make sense. They're the reason you go into executive session relate to confidential information that's being discussed with the town council.
Right? So can I now have a motion to move into executive session? Councilmember Parmet.
Mr. Mayor, I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, section 4, subsection G, for consideration of non-finalist applicants for the town manager position, and which applicants are protected by the mandatory non-disclosure provision of the Colorado Open Records Act, CRS 24-72204, sub 3A 11A.
Right, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. For this motion to pass, we'll need a 2/3 of the floor majority.
Wait a minute. Or, after the vote, are you a break?
That's not correct.
Please correct me, but,
Yes,
okay.
we will arrange a break. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Like the record reflect, it was passed with a 7 in favor, 0 opposed, majority. And for those in the audience who have already left, is there anyone else online?
8 people.
All right, for those in the online in the audience, after this executive session, there will be no further action taken, and no other business will be conducted. The town council will adjourn the regular meeting at the conclusion of the executive session. So at this point, we'll terminate the online access, and I declare this meeting in recess.